echoes of disapproval. The first light of dawn filters through the narrow window of Lucius's workshop, casting dancing patterns across walls lined with countless tiny tesserae, each piece of stone and glass catching the golden rays like scattered stars. He stands before his latest creation, a magnificent mosaic depicting Diana in her sacred grove. But his hands tremble slightly as he traces the intricate borders with his eyes. The work is exquisite. Anyone can see that. Yet all he can hear are the sharp words that fell from Senator Valerius's lips just 3 days ago. "Adequate," the senator had declared, his voice cutting through the warm afternoon air of his villa's atrium. "Though I expected more refinement from someone of your supposed reputation." Those words echo now in the morning stillness, as persistent as the sound of his own heartbeat. Lucius runs his calloused fingers along the edge of his workbench, feeling the familiar texture of marble dust and dried adhesive, the honest residue of his craft. How many hours had he spent perfecting each curve of the goddess's face? How many times had he adjusted the subtle gradations of blue and green that brought her forest to life? The workshop around him tells the story of a master craftsman. Shelves line every wall, filled with carefully sorted tesserae arranged by color and size, deep crimsons that glow like wine in sunlight, blues ranging from the palest sky to the depths of midnight, yellows that capture the essence of summer wheat. Each tiny piece represents possibility, a note in the symphony he creates with stone and patience. Yet despite the evidence of his skills surrounding him, despite the commissions that have filled his calendar for months ahead, Lucius cannot shake the weight of that single word, adequate. It sits heavy in his chest, transforming his pride into something smaller, more fragile. He remembers when he first arrived in Rome, 15 years ago now, carrying nothing but a leather satchel of tools and dreams larger than the city itself. The established artists had looked at him with skepticism. This young man from the provinces with his unconventional techniques and bold use of color. But slowly, commission by commission, he had built something precious. A reputation, a livelihood, a sense of belonging in this great sprawling metropolis. The Diana mosaic before him represents months of meticulous work. He had studied the senator's collection, walked through his gardens, observed how light moved through the spaces where the piece would live. Every decision had been deliberate. The way Diana's robes seemed to flutter with captured movement, how her eyes hold both wildness and wisdom, the delicate interplay of shadows that gives depth to the forest around her. When he had first unveiled it, there had been a moment, just a breath, when he saw something flicker across the senator's face. Surprise, perhaps, even admiration, but it vanished so quickly that Lucius wondered if he had imagined it, replaced by that cool assessment and those cutting words that now refused to leave him be. The morning grows brighter, and he can hear the city awakening beyond his walls. Cartwheels on stone, the calls of merchants setting up their stalls, the distant sound of children already at play. Rome never truly sleeps, and neither, it seems, does the voice of doubt that has taken residence in his mind. He moves to another section of his workshop where several smaller pieces wait in various stages of completion. A portrait of a merchant's wife, her kind eyes emerging from thousands of carefully placed fragments. A geometric pattern destined for a bathhouse floor, its mathematical precision both challenging and soothing to create. Each one represents trust placed in his hands, faith in his vision. But today, even these works in progress seem to whisper questions he doesn't want to hear. Is the merchant's wife too idealized? Will the bathhouse owner find the pattern too bold, too unconventional? When did he begin to see his own work through the lens of others' potential disapproval? The senator's villa rises in his memory like a marble monument to judgment itself. Valerius had led him through corridors lined with sculptures and paintings, each piece accompanied by commentary on its worth, its place in the hierarchy of artistic achievement. The senator collected art the way some men collect coins, not for love, but for the power that ownership brings. This piece, Valerius had said, pausing before a painting of Venus, was created by Apollodorus. You know his work, of course. Now there was an artist who understood the weight of tradition, the importance of proper technique. The implication hung in the air like incense, heavy and inescapable. Lucius had nodded politely, but something inside him had withered slightly. His own techniques, developed through years of experimentation and observation, suddenly felt less like innovations and more like mistakes waiting to be discovered. Standing now in his workshop, surrounded by the tools and materials that have been his companions for so many years, Lucius tries to remember what it felt like before. Before that moment, when external validation became more important than the quiet satisfaction of work well done. There was a time when the completion of a piece brought him pure joy, when the final tessera placed just so would send a thrill of accomplishment through his entire being. He picks up a small piece of deep blue glass, holding it up to the morning light. It transforms in his fingers, becoming sky, becoming water, becoming possibility itself. This is what he loves. The moment when raw material becomes something greater, when his vision takes form in the physical world. The Diana mosaic catches his eye again, and for a moment he tries to see it fresh, as if encountering it for the first time. The goddess stands poised at the edge of her sacred grove, one foot forward as if caught mid-step between the mortal world and her own divine realm. Her expression holds secrets, the kind of mysteries that make viewers return again and again, finding new details with each observation. The forest around her lives and breathes despite being made of stone. Lucius had spent weeks perfecting the way light filters through the canopy, how shadows pool at the base of ancient trees. Each leaf, each branch, each dappled patch of sunlight required dozens of tiny pieces, carefully chosen and precisely placed. Perhaps that is what troubles him most about the senator's judgment, not just the dismissal of his skill, but the reduction of months of passionate work to a single, cutting word. How do you measure the hours spent selecting just the right shade of green for new spring leaves? How do you quantify the satisfaction of capturing the exact curve of Diana's bow, the precise angle that suggests both power and grace? The city sounds grow louder now as Rome fully awakens. Soon his assistant Marcus will arrive, eager to continue work on the merchant's commission. The young man reminds Lucius of himself at that age, full of enthusiasm, seeing each new project as an adventure rather than a test to be passed or failed. When did that change for him? When did the joy become secondary to the judgment? He sets down the blue tessera and moves to the window, looking out over the familiar rooftops and narrow streets of his neighborhood. Somewhere out there, in villas and public buildings throughout the city, his work lives on walls and floors, silent testimonies to years of dedication and craft. People walk past his mosaics daily, perhaps pausing to admire a particular detail or simply enjoying the beauty without conscious thought. Most of them will never know his name. They will never offer critique or praise. They will simply experience what he has created, and in that anonymous appreciation, perhaps there is something more honest than all the senator's studied judgments combined. The morning light has grown stronger now, and his workshop feels less like a place of doubt and more like what it has always been. A sanctuary where imagination takes physical form, where patience and skill combine to create something lasting. Tomorrow, people will still walk past the Diana mosaic in Senator Valerius's villa. Some will pause, caught by the goddess's enigmatic expression or the play of light through her eternal forest. And in those moments of connection between viewer and art, the senator's opinion becomes just one voice among many, no more or less important than the spontaneous gasp of a child seeing the mosaic for the first time, or the quiet contemplation of a servant who passes it daily on her way to tend the garden. The sound of footsteps on the cobblestones below tells him that Marcus approaches, ready for another day of collaborative creation. Soon the workshop will fill with the familiar sounds of their craft. The gentle tap of hammer on chisel, the whisper of tesserae being sorted and selected, the quiet conversation that flows between master and student as they shape beauty from raw stone. The unseen masterpiece. But as Marcus enters the workshop, Lucius finds himself only half present, his mind still wandering the marble halls of Senator Valerius's villa, replaying every moment of yesterday's encounter. The memory unfolds like a scroll he cannot stop unrolling, each detail sharp and unforgiving in the morning light. He sees himself again, standing before his completed work, the grand mosaic that had consumed months of his life. The central figure of Minerva rose from a field of deep blue tesserae, her shield catching light from carefully placed gold stones, her owl perched with wings spread wide in eternal wisdom. Around the goddess, he had woven intricate borders of acanthus leaves and geometric patterns, each tiny piece of marble and glass selected for its perfect hue, its exact shape. The proportions are adequate, the senator had said, his voice echoing off the polished walls. Adequate. The word still stings like a poorly aimed chisel strike. Lucius remembers how his hands had trembled slightly as he gestured toward the work, explaining his choices, the way he had positioned Minerva's gaze to follow the natural flow of foot traffic through the atrium, how the colors shifted from cool blues at the edges to warm golds at the center, drawing the eye inexorably to the goddess's serene face. But Senator Valerius had simply nodded, his attention already drifting to other matters. "It will suffice," he had declared, before discussing payment terms with the same enthusiasm one might reserve for purchasing grain. Now, in the gentle morning light filtering through his workshop windows, Lucius questions everything. Had he truly captured the divine essence of Minerva, or had he created merely a competent arrangement of colored stones? The doubt creeps through his thoughts like water through limestone, persistent and erosive. He moves to his work table where sketches for future projects lie scattered. Drawings of dolphins leaping through stylized waves, of Venus rising from sea foam, of elaborate hunting scenes with stags frozen mid-leap. Each design represents hours of careful planning, of studying proportions and considering how light would play across the finished surface. Yet now they seem uncertain, tentative. Marcus begins arranging tools with practiced efficiency, but Lucius barely notices. His inner eye is fixed on that moment in the villa when he had hoped, no, expected, to see wonder in the senator's face. He had imagined recognition, perhaps even awe, at the transformation of his vision into permanent beauty. Instead, he had received the kind of acknowledgement one gives to a functional but unremarkable household item. "Master," Marcus's voice carries gentle concern. "Shall we begin sorting the new shipment of marble?" Lucius nods absently, but his hands move without conscious direction. Was the senator right to be unmoved? Had Lucius become so absorbed in technical perfection that he had forgotten to breathe soul into the work? The tessellated surface of Minerva's face had been flawless, each tiny cube of stone precisely cut and placed. The color gradations were subtle and sophisticated. The overall composition followed classical proportions exactly. Perhaps that was the problem. Perhaps in his pursuit of technical mastery, he had created something that spoke more of skill than of spirit. He remembers his earliest works, crude by today's standards, but alive with something indefinable. A simple border of vine leaves he had created for a modest household shrine, where each leaf seemed to rustle with captured wind. A small panel depicting fish that appeared to swim through their tesserae sea with joyful abandon. Those pieces had possessed an energy, a vitality that his recent, more sophisticated works sometimes seemed to lack. The morning sun climbs higher, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow across the workshop floor. Lucius watches these natural mosaics form and dissolve, noting how the interplay of brightness and darkness creates depth and movement without any human intervention. Nature, it seems, achieves effortlessly what he struggles to capture in stone. The new commission sketches arrived this morning, Marcus mentions, holding up a small scroll. A merchant family wishes to commemorate their ancestors in the entryway of their new villa. Lucius accepts the scroll but doesn't immediately unroll it. Instead, he finds himself wondering about those ancestors, who they were, what they loved, what made them laugh or weep. How does one capture the essence of lives lived and lost in an arrangement of colored stone? How does one honor memory while creating beauty that will endure for generations? Perhaps this is where his recent work has faltered. In focusing so intently on perfection, on meeting classical standards and impressing sophisticated patrons, he may have lost touch with the deeper purpose of his art. Mosaics are not merely decorative surfaces. They are stories told in stone, emotions preserved in tesserae, moments of human experience transformed into lasting beauty. The doubt that has plagued him since yesterday begins to shift, becoming not a burden but a teacher. Senator Valerius's lukewarm response, painful as it was, might be pointing him toward a truth he needs to hear. Technical mastery without emotional authenticity creates work that is competent but not compelling. A walk through the Forum. Perhaps what he needs is not more time in his workshop, but time away from it entirely. The walls that once felt protective now seem confining, and the familiar tools that usually bring comfort feel heavy in his hands. Lucius sets down his cutting implement and walks to the small window overlooking the street. The afternoon light has shifted to the golden hue of early evening, and something in that warm glow calls to him. Without conscious decision, he finds himself reaching for his cloak. His feet carry him through the doorway and into the narrow streets that wind toward the heart of Rome. The Forum calls to him as it has since childhood, that great gathering place where all of Roman life converges, where the pulse of the empire beats strongest. As he walks, the familiar rhythm of his sandals against stone begins to work its quiet magic. Each step takes him further from the weight of yesterday's disappointment, further from the spiral of self-doubt that has consumed his morning. The streets around him are alive with the gentle bustle of evening. Merchants calling out their final offers of the day, children darting between carts, the soft murmur of conversation drifting from open doorways. The Forum opens before him like a vast embrace. Here, beneath the shadow of temples and basilicas, beneath columns that have witnessed centuries of human drama, Lucius feels his perspective begin to shift. The worries that seemed so enormous in the confines of his workshop suddenly feel smaller, more manageable, placed in context of this grand stage where countless Romans have lived and loved and struggled before him. He moves slowly through the familiar spaces, letting his eyes drink in details he usually hurries past. An elderly woman sits beside a fountain, her weathered hands sorting through a basket of late-season figs. Her movements are careful, deliberate. Each piece of fruit examined with the patience of someone who understands that good things cannot be rushed. There is artistry in her simple task, Lucius realizes. Beauty in the way she arranges her modest display, pride in the quality of what she offers. Near the steps of the Basilica Julia, a young scribe packs away his writing materials as the light begins to fade. His ink-stained fingers move with practiced efficiency, but Lucius notices how gently he handles each scroll, how carefully he wraps his stylus. Here is someone who understands that tools are sacred things, that the instruments of creation deserve respect and care, The vendors are closing their stalls now, the day's commerce winding down in a symphony of quiet activity. Awnings are folded, goods are packed away, coins are counted with soft metallic whispers. There is something deeply peaceful about this daily ritual, this transition from the energy of commerce to the calm of evening reflection. Lucius finds himself drawn to a small shrine tucked between two larger buildings. Someone has left fresh flowers there, simple wildflowers probably gathered from the hills outside the city. They are not perfect specimens. Some petals are bruised, some stems bent, but arranged with obvious care and offered with sincere devotion, they possess a beauty that no expensive marble could match. The realization comes to him gradually, like dawn breaking over distant hills. He has been so focused on creating something impressive, something that would earn praise from important men like Senator Valerius, that he has forgotten why he began making mosaics in the first place. Those early works, the ones that now seem simple to his trained eye. They were created from joy, from a pure desire to capture beauty and share it with others. He thinks of his first mosaic, a small piece he made as a young apprentice, depicting a bird in flight. The tesserae were not perfectly cut, the colors not expertly matched, but every stone had been placed with wonder, with the excitement of someone discovering his calling. That bird seemed ready to take wing from the wall, animated by the enthusiasm of its creator. Somewhere along the path to mastery, he had traded that enthusiasm for technique. He had learned to cut stones with precision, to blend colors with sophistication, to create complex patterns that demonstrated his skill. But in gaining technical perfection, had he lost something essential? Had he forgotten that the most important tool an artist possesses is not his hands, but his heart? The forum around him provides its own answer. Every surface here tells a story. Worn steps speak of countless feet that have climbed them. Weathered columns bear witness to storms they have weathered. Ancient stones hold the echoes of voices long silenced. This is not perfection. It is something far more valuable. It is authenticity born of genuine experience. As twilight deepens, torches begin to flicker to life throughout the forum. Their warm light dances across marble and stone, creating patterns that shift and change with each movement of the flame. Lucius watches this interplay of light and shadow, seeing in it a metaphor for his own artistic journey. The most beautiful effects are not the static ones. They are the living ones, the ones that breathe and change and respond to the world around them. A group of young people passes by, their laughter bright in the evening air. They are not concerned with impressing senators or creating lasting monuments. They are simply alive in this moment, finding joy in friendship and youth and the simple pleasure of being together. Their happiness is infectious, and Lucius feels something in his chest loosen, some knot of tension he had not even realized he was carrying. The peace of the forum settles around him like a comfortable cloak. Here, surrounded by the gentle evidence of human life continuing its eternal rhythms, his artistic crisis feels less like a catastrophe and more like a natural part of growth. Perhaps every artist must face this moment, when technical skill catches up to ambition but has not yet reunited with the original spark of inspiration. Tomorrow, he will return to his workshop, but he will bring with him the memory of this evening. The reminder that true beauty lies not in perfection, but in authenticity, not in impressing others, but in honestly expressing the world as he sees and feels it. Aurelia's wisdom. The narrow street between his workshop and home holds the familiar comfort of worn stones beneath his sandals. Each step carries him away from the forum's revelations, toward the gentle glow spilling from Aurelia's bakery windows. Even at this hour, warmth emanates from within, the lingering heat of ovens that have worked since before dawn, the soft golden light that speaks of bread and belonging. Aurelia emerges from the doorway as if summoned by his footsteps, wiping flour-dusted hands on her well-worn apron. Her face, lined by years of early mornings and honest labor, brightens with genuine pleasure at seeing him. There is something about her presence that immediately settles the restless energy in his chest, like stepping into shade after hours in harsh sunlight. "Lucius," she calls softly, her voice carrying the warmth of fresh bread and maternal concern. "You look as though you've been wrestling with the gods themselves." She gestures toward the small wooden bench beside her doorway. The same bench where neighborhood children gather each morning for sweet rolls, where elderly citizens pause to rest weary bones, where life's simple rituals unfold with quiet grace. He settles beside her, feeling the day's tensions begin to release from his shoulders. The bench, worn smooth by countless bodies seeking rest, seems to cradle not just his physical form but his troubled thoughts as well. Aurelia moves with unhurried purpose, disappearing briefly into her shop before returning with a small loaf, still warm from the oven, and a cup of watered wine. "Tell me," she says, settling her comfortable bulk beside him. Her presence is like the bakery itself, substantial, nourishing, utterly without pretense. "What troubles the artist tonight?" The bread tears easily in his hands, releasing steam that carries the essence of grain and patience, of seeds planted in distant fields, harvested by calloused hands, ground by millstones turned by donkeys who know only the rhythm of their daily work. Simple elements transformed through time and care into something that sustains life itself. "I fear I have lost something essential," he admits, the words emerging more easily than expected. "My mosaics, they are technically accomplished, but Senator Valerius spoke truly when he called them cold. I create beautiful patterns, but I wonder if I have forgotten how to create beauty that moves the soul." Aurelia nods slowly, her weathered hands folding in her lap. "You know," she begins, her voice taking on the cadence of someone who has observed life's patterns for many years, "I have watched you work since you were barely tall enough to reach your father's tools. Even then, you saw things differently. Noticed how light caught the edge of a broken tile, how colors sang when placed, just so." She gestures toward her own domain, the simple bakery with its practical wooden shelves, its honest clay vessels, its absence of ornamental flourishes. "Every morning I make bread. The same ingredients, the same process, day after day. Yet each loaf is different, because I am different each day. Some mornings I am worried about my grandson's fever, and that worry kneads itself into the dough. Other days I am filled with joy at the first spring flowers, and somehow that joy rises with the bread." A cat appears from the shadows, moving with liquid grace toward the warmth of human presence. Aurelia reaches down to stroke its fur, and the creature's purr adds a gentle rumble to the evening's quiet symphony. "The bread feeds bodies," she continues, "but it also carries something of my heart. Not because I try to impress anyone, but because I cannot help but put myself into my work." Lucius finds himself really listening, not just to her words, but to the deeper wisdom they carry. This woman, who will never be celebrated in marble halls or praised by senators, understands something fundamental about the relationship between creator and creation. Her bread nourishes the neighborhood not through technical innovation, but through the simple authenticity of care made manifest. "You speak of losing something essential," Aurelia says gently, "but perhaps what you have lost is not skill or vision. Perhaps you have simply forgotten to trust your own heart." She breaks off a piece of bread, offering it to him with the same natural generosity she extends to everyone who passes her threshold. The bread's warmth spreads through his palms, and he realizes this simple offering contains everything he has been struggling to understand. No senator commissioned this loaf. No wealthy patron demanded specific ingredients or particular shapes, yet it possesses a completeness, a rightness that speaks directly to human need and human comfort. When you were young, Aurelia continues, you would show me your practice pieces, small tiles arranged on scraps of wood. Your eyes would shine as you explained how this blue reminded you of your mother's favorite dress, how that gold captured the exact shade of wheat at harvest. You were not trying to impress anyone. You were simply sharing what you saw. Her words settle into the quiet spaces of his mind like seeds, finding fertile ground. He remembers those early experiments, the joy of discovery when colors revealed unexpected harmonies, the satisfaction of solving visual puzzles not for approval, but for the pure pleasure of creation itself. The senator sees only surfaces, Aurelia observes with gentle certainty. But your neighbors, we see the love you put into every piece. The mosaic in the fountain brings children joy every day. The pattern in the temple floor helps worshippers feel closer to the divine. These are not small achievements, Lucius. They are the real work of art, connecting human hearts to beauty, to meaning, to each other. The evening air carries the mingled scents of cooling bread and settling dust, of a day transforming into night, of work completed and rest earned. Somewhere in the distance, a mother calls her children home. Closer by, an old man's sandals whisper against stone as he makes his way to familiar comfort. Return to your workshop tomorrow, Aurelia suggests, rising to gather her empty cup and brush crumbs from her apron. But remember, the tiles do not need you to be perfect. They need you to be present. They need you to bring your whole self, your joys and sorrows, your questions and discoveries. That is how cold stone becomes warm art. As she disappears into her bakery, Lucius remains on the bench, feeling something shift inside his chest, a loosening of tension he had not fully realized he carried. The bread's warmth lingers in his hands, and with it, the beginning of understanding. Relaxation at the baths. The sun hangs lower now as Lucius makes his way through the bustling streets toward the baths of Caracalla. His feet know this path well, the familiar route that leads away from the pressures of his workshop, away from the weight of expectations, toward the one place in Rome where all citizens become simply human. The massive brick walls of the bath complex rise before him like gentle giants, their weathered surfaces telling stories of countless visitors who have sought the same refuge he seeks now. Steam rises from the building's heart, carrying with it the promise of warmth and release. Lucius pauses at the entrance, breathing in the mineral-scented air that speaks of healing waters and time suspended. Inside, the grandeur never fails to move him. Soaring ceilings stretch toward the heavens, supported by columns that dwarf even the tallest man. Marble gleams in shades of cream and rose, while intricate mosaics dance across the walls. The work of artists who came before him, who faced their own doubts, their own critics, their own search for meaning in their craft. He moves through the changing area with practiced ease, folding his tunic carefully, setting aside the day's concerns along with his clothes. Here, without the tools of his trade, without the identifying marks of his profession, he becomes simply Lucius, a man seeking restoration. The tepidarium welcomes him first, its warm air embracing his skin like a gentle friend. Other bathers move through the space with the unhurried grace that these waters inspire. A merchant he recognizes from the forum nods in quiet greeting. Here, there is no need for the performance of daily commerce, no need to negotiate or persuade. There is only the shared understanding that they have all come seeking the same gift of peace. Lucius settles onto a marble bench, feeling the smooth stone warm beneath him. Around him, conversations flow like water itself. Soft murmurs about families, gentle laughter shared between friends, the comfortable silence of those who have found their rhythm in this ancient ritual of cleansing and renewal. An elderly senator sits nearby, his weathered hands moving slowly through the warm air as he speaks with a younger man, perhaps his son. Their voices carry no urgency, no ambition. Here, stripped of their togas and titles, they are simply father and child, sharing thoughts that matter more than politics or position. The sight stirs something in Lucius's chest. When did he last create something simply for the joy of it, without thought of judgment or reward? When did he last approach his tiles with the same unhurried presence these men bring to their conversation? He moves deeper into the complex, toward the caldarium where the hottest waters wait. The air grows thicker, more enveloping, and he feels his muscles beginning to release tensions he had not even realized they held. The heat draws out more than perspiration. It seems to pull away the accumulated weight of worry, the residue of self-doubt that has clung to him like dust. The caldarium opens before him in all its steamy glory. The pool stretches wide and inviting, its surface disturbed only by the gentle movements of other bathers. Marble steps descend into water so clear he can see every tile that lines the bottom. Tiles laid by craftsmen who understood that even the parts of their work that would be submerged, that would rarely be seen clearly, deserved their full attention and care. Lucius descends slowly, letting the heat envelop him inch by inch. The water receives him without judgment, supporting his weight, asking nothing of him but presence. He closes his eyes and feels the mineral-rich warmth seep into his bones, carrying away the last remnants of the morning's harsh critique. Around him, the soft sounds of the baths create their own music, water lapping gently against marble, the quiet splash of someone entering the pool, muffled conversations that blend into a soothing hum, the distant echo of footsteps in the great halls beyond. It is a symphony of human contentment, of souls finding rest. A woman floats nearby, her face serene as she gazes up at the painted ceiling above. Her expression holds no worry, no calculation, only the peaceful absorption of someone fully present in the moment. Watching her, Lucius remembers what it feels like to exist without the constant internal commentary of self-judgment. He lets himself sink deeper into the warmth until the water reaches his shoulders, his neck. The heat penetrates muscles that have been tight with tension for weeks. His breathing slows, deepens, finding its own natural rhythm without effort or intention. In this suspended moment, surrounded by the gentle luxury of warm water and ancient stone, Lucius begins to understand something Aurelia's words had pointed toward. The tiles in his workshop are not his judges. They are his partners. The stones do not demand perfection. They offer possibility. His hands do not need to prove anything. They need only to express what lives in his heart. The realization comes not as a sudden revelation, but as a gradual settling, like sediment finding its natural place in still water. He thinks of the mosaic waiting in his workshop, the one Senator Valerius had dismissed. Perhaps the senator was right that it lacked something, but perhaps what it lacked was not technical skill. Perhaps it lacked the very presence he feels now, this quality of unhurried attention, of being fully where he is. The water holds him as these thoughts flow through him without urgency or force. Here in the caldarium, with steam rising around him like incense, Lucius feels something he had almost forgotten. The simple pleasure of existing without purpose, without goal, without the need to prove or achieve or impress. When he finally emerges from the pool, water streaming from his skin, he moves with a different quality than when he entered. The same body, the same hands that will return to his tiles tomorrow, but somehow lighter, somehow more present to himself. As he makes his way toward the cooler pools for the final stage of his bath, Lucius carries with him more than clean skin and relaxed muscles. He carries the memory of what it feels like to be held without judgment, to exist without performance. and the growing understanding that this is the quality his art has been thirsting for. Dirchorf, Reflections by the Tiber. The evening air carries a different coolness as Lucius makes his way through the quieting streets toward the Tiber. His sandals find their rhythm on the worn stones, each step carrying him further from the crowded warmth of the baths and closer to something he cannot yet name. The sky above has deepened to that particular shade of violet that exists only in the space between day and night, when the world holds its breath and waits. He carries with him a simple wax tablet and stylus, tools he has not touched for sketching in many months. They feel unfamiliar in his hands now, like old friends whose faces have grown distant with time. But tonight, something in the peaceful weight of his relaxed body calls for their company. The river reveals itself gradually as he descends the stone steps toward the water's edge. First the sound, that eternal murmur of current meeting stone that has sung the same song since before Rome was even a dream. Then the scent, fresh and earthy, carrying whispers of distant mountains and rain-fed streams. Finally, the sight itself, the Tiber flowing dark and steady beneath the first emerging stars. Lucius finds a smooth section of the embankment and settles himself there, cross-legged like a child. The stone still holds warmth from the day's sun, a gentle heat that seeps through his tunic and reminds his muscles to stay soft. He places the wax tablet on his lap and simply sits. For the first time in months, he is not thinking about Senator Valerius. He is not cataloging his failures or planning his redemption. He is simply here, present to the river's voice and the way the last light catches on the water's surface like scattered coins. His stylus finds the wax almost without conscious thought, not to create anything important, not to prove anything to anyone, but simply because his hands want to move, want to dance with what his eyes are seeing. He sketches the curve of the opposite bank, loose flowing lines that care nothing for precision and everything for the feeling of the moment. The river teaches him as he draws. See how it moves, never forcing its way, never fighting the stones that shape its course. It simply flows, finding the path of least resistance, wearing away obstacles not through violence, but through patient, persistent presence. There is power in this yielding, a strength that Senator Valerius, for all his authority, might never understand. A heron appears at the water's edge, stepping with deliberate grace through the shallows. Lucius watches, stylus poised, but does not immediately try to capture the bird. Instead, he lets himself receive the gift of its presence, the way it moves with such certainty, not because it knows the future, but because it trusts completely in this moment, this step, this breath. When he finally begins to sketch the heron, his hand moves differently than it has in months. There is no grasping, no desperate attempt to possess the bird's beauty. Instead, his stylus becomes a kind of conversation, a gentle dialogue between his heart and the wax, mediated by what his eyes are truly seeing rather than what he thinks should be there. The drawing that emerges is imperfect by the standards he has been holding himself to. The proportions are loose, the lines confident but unrefined, and yet there is something alive in these marks that has been missing from his recent mosaics, something that breathes. As the heron lifts into flight, Lucius continues sketching from memory, but it is not the memory of his mind that guides him. It is the memory held in his body, the way his heart lifted when those great wings spread, the way his breath caught at the beauty of such effortless power. This is what he draws, not the heron itself, but the feeling of having witnessed grace. The stars are fully visible now, pinpricks of ancient light reflected in the river's dark mirror. Lucius turns to a fresh section of his tablet and begins sketching these too, not as they appear to the eye, but as they feel to the soul. points of hope scattered across the vast unknown, each one a reminder that beauty exists even in darkness, especially in darkness. He thinks of his mosaics waiting in the workshop, those precise, lifeless arrangements of stone that have brought him such frustration. For the first time, he sees them not as failures, but as necessary steps. Like the river's patient wearing away of obstacles, they taught him technique. They showed him what happens when skill exists without soul. They prepared him for this moment, this understanding. Tomorrow he will return to his tiles, but he will bring with him the memory of this evening. The feeling of creating without grasping, of allowing beauty to flow through him rather than trying to manufacture it. He will remember the heron's trust in the present moment, the river's patient persistence, the way the stars shine not because they must prove anything, but simply because it is their nature to give light. The wax tablet in his hands holds perhaps a dozen rough sketches now. Nothing that Senator Valerius would recognize as art, nothing that would impress the sophisticated patrons of Rome, but they pulse with something his recent work has lacked, the irreplaceable quality of authentic presence, of a heart that dared to remain open to wonder. As he rises to make his way home through the lamp-lit streets, Lucius carries more than sketches. He carries the river's teaching, the understanding that true art, like water, finds its power not in force but in flow, not in the desperate attempt to impress, but in the willingness to be genuinely moved and to let that movement speak through willing hands. The Tiber continues its ancient song behind him, patient, persistent, eternal. And in his heart, Lucius feels the first stirrings of his next creation, not yet formed, but alive with possibility. The beauty of imperfection. The next morning finds Lucius in his workshop, but this time he moves differently through the familiar space. His footsteps are quieter, more deliberate. There's no rush to begin something new. Instead, he finds himself drawn to the corners where his older works rest, pieces he hasn't truly looked at in months, perhaps years. He lifts a small panel from behind a stack of marble tiles, a mosaic he created 2 summers ago, a simple scene of olive branches against azure sky. As he holds it to the morning light streaming through his window, something catches in his throat. The tasseli aren't perfectly aligned. Some edges show tiny gaps where the grout has settled unevenly. One leaf shows a slight wobble where his hand must have trembled on a particularly warm afternoon. But oh, the life in it. The way the silver-green stones catch the light and seem to shimmer with their own breath. The imperfect spacing that somehow makes the branches feel more real, more alive than any mathematical precision could achieve. He sets it carefully on his workbench and reaches for another. A border pattern of intertwining vines. Here, too, the irregularities tell their own story. A section where he'd clearly worked late into the evening. The placement slightly less steady, the color choices more intuitive than calculated. Yet these very variations create a rhythm, like the natural cadence of breathing or the gentle sway of actual vines in a summer breeze. When did I stop seeing this? He whispers to the quiet workshop. When did the small imperfections become flaws instead of signatures of the human hand that made them? He pulls out piece after piece, a geometric pattern with one corner slightly askew that somehow makes the entire design more dynamic. A portrait where the subject's eyes aren't perfectly symmetrical, yet carry such warmth and character that symmetry would have stolen their soul. Each work tells the story not just of its subject, but of the man who made it, the Lucius who was learning, discovering, feeling his way through stone and color towards something beautiful. The morning light shifts across his workbench, illuminating the collection of his own forgotten treasures. He sees now what he'd been missing in his pursuit of flawless technique. These pieces breathe because they bear the gentle marks of being made by human hands, hands that sometimes trembled with emotion, sometimes moved with confident joy, sometimes hesitated in uncertainty before finding their way forward. A memory surfaces. His first teacher, old Marcus, whose gnarled fingers could no longer grip the smallest tesserae with perfect steadiness. Yet Marcus's final works had possessed a quality that transcended technique, a looseness that somehow captured the essence of his subjects more truly than any precise rendering ever could. "The stone remembers the heart that placed it," Marcus used to say. "Perfect hands make perfect mosaics, but only imperfect hands make living ones." Lucius traces his finger along the edge of an early work. A simple fish, swimming through stylized waves. The creature's form wavers slightly. The scales aren't uniform. The tail fin shows the hesitation of a younger artist still finding his confidence. Yet something in that uncertainty captures the actual movement of a fish through water, the fluid, unpredictable grace that no rigid perfection could ever convey. He thinks of Senator Valerius's criticism, the demand for technical excellence that had driven him to create works of flawless coldness. But what if the senator was wrong? What if the very imperfections Valerius would condemn were actually the soul of the work? The river's teaching echoes in his mind. The understanding that water's power comes not from rigid control but from natural flow. His art, he realizes, had been most alive when he'd allowed it to flow through him rather than forcing it into predetermined perfection. The slight tremor of excitement when placing a particularly beautiful stone, the intuitive color choice that defied logic but felt absolutely right, the happy accident that opened up possibilities he'd never planned. He lifts another piece, a landscape showing the hills outside Rome at sunset. The sky isn't evenly graduated from gold to purple. Instead, it shows the organic variation of a hand that was responding moment by moment to the feeling of that remembered evening. Some areas glow with concentrated warmth, where he'd lingered with the golden stones. Others show the quick, confident strokes where inspiration had guided his placement. The result isn't technically perfect, but it pulses with the actual experience of watching day fade into night. "This is what I'd lost," he murmurs, understanding flooding through him like warm water, the willingness to let his humanity show in his work, to allow the natural variations of heart and hand to become part of the beauty rather than flaws to be eliminated. He sees now that his recent pursuit of perfection had been a kind of hiding, an attempt to create work so technically flawless that they couldn't be criticized. But in protecting himself from judgment, he'd also protected his art from life itself. The tremor of genuine emotion, the slight irregularity that comes from being truly present in the moment of creation, the beautiful imperfection that marks something as made by human hands, guided by a human heart. The workshop feels different now, not like a place where he must prove himself worthy of approval, but like a space where he can offer his authentic response to beauty, where imperfection isn't failure, but the signature of a living soul engaging with living art. As the morning light continues its slow journey across his rediscovered works, Lucius feels something settling in his chest, a deep appreciation not just for what he's created, but for the imperfect, seeking, gloriously human artist who created them. Sunset peace. The peace that has settled in his chest spreads outward now, like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Lucius moves to his workshop window and gazes out at the Roman countryside beyond the city walls, where the sun is beginning its slow descent toward the horizon. The light has that particular golden quality of evening, soft and forgiving, painting everything it touches with warmth. He thinks of Senator Valerius and realizes the sharp edge of that criticism has worn smooth, not because the words were untrue, but because they no longer define the boundaries of his worth. There will always be voices that demand perfection, voices that mistake technical mastery for artistic truth. But standing here in his workshop, surrounded by the honest imperfections of his life's work, Lucius understands that those voices are just part of the larger chorus of existence, no more or less important than the sound of wind through olive trees. The sunset deepens, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, colors that no mosaic could perfectly capture, and somehow that impossibility feels like a gift rather than a limitation. Beauty isn't meant to be captured completely. It's meant to be witnessed, honored, responded to with whatever tools and heart we possess. His mosaics don't need to hold all the beauty of a sunset. They need only to hold his genuine response to that beauty. He remembers Aurelia's hands kneading bread, how she worked with such presence, such acceptance of the simple task before her. There was no struggle there, no desperate reaching for something beyond the moment, just the honest engagement of a human being with the materials of her craft. That's what his art wants to become. Not a monument to his skill, but a record of his authentic engagement with beauty. The countryside stretches before him in the evening light. Vineyards and olive groves, distant hills crowned with cypress trees. Somewhere out there, other artisans are ending their day's work. Potters cleaning their wheels, weavers setting aside their looms, stoneworkers laying down their chisels, all of them carrying the same mixture of satisfaction and uncertainty that comes with making something from nothing, with offering their imperfect human response to the mystery of creation. Lucius turns back to his work table where small piles of tesserae wait like seeds ready for planting. Tomorrow he will begin something new. Not because he has solved the riddle of perfect art, but because he has remembered the joy of authentic making. His hands will place each small stone with presence rather than anxiety, with curiosity rather than desperate need for approval. The workshop grows dim as twilight settles over Rome, but it's a peaceful dimness, full of possibility rather than shadows. He thinks of the Tiber flowing past the city walls, how it carries both silt and starlight, how it moves with such unhurried certainty toward the sea. His art can have that same quality, that same acceptance of what it carries, that same trust in its own natural rhythm. Outside his window, the first stars appear in the deepening sky, ancient lights that have watched over countless artists, countless moments of doubt and discovery. They shine not because they are perfect, but because they are genuinely themselves, burning with their own authentic fire across the vast darkness. Lucius feels ready now, not because he has found all the answers, but because he has remembered the right questions. How can I be present with this moment? How can I respond authentically to what moves me? How can I create from love rather than fear? And as the last light fades from the Roman sky and peace settles over his workshop like a gentle blessing, he knows that tomorrow he will place the first stone of his next mosaic with hands that are finally, blessedly free to create from the honest depths of his gloriously imperfect human heart.